Hello, let us look at January 2019 questions. So when you look at the first question, we're looking at two different samples here. But one thing that we get to realize is that standard deviation for second sample is greater than the first one. As you know that standard deviation is greater, that means it's more scattered. So therefore, data set 2 has greater variability. In this case, as you can see, variability means things are more scattered. Alright, so let's look at the second question. We have the function, given function f of x equals log base 3 of x, and then g of x is the image after translation 5 units to the left. Then how do we do it? Then we get to realize that this would have been our answer, because when we have x plus 5, that implies that the graph shifts to the left by 5 units. Alright, let's move on to the next problem. When factoring the given expression right over here, which equation can be used? Now, so first we're going to factor out x squared from first two terms, and then we're going to factor out -9 from the second two terms. Then we get to realize that this looks identical to the first one. Now, if you factor continually, x plus 2 can be factored from the both terms, then we get to realize that that's the same thing as second one, because from second one you can factor out x squared minus 9, then you will realize that we have identical expression. Alright, but we get to realize that we have x plus 2, not x minus 2, therefore third one is out. This gives us choice 1 and 2 to be our answer, so therefore option number 1 is our answer. Alright, let's move on to the next problem. So here we have number 4. After first bounce, the height was 121. And then after third bounce, it was 64. Now, what is the height after fifth bounce? And then we realize it was geometric sequence. So I can say a sub 1 equals 121. And a sub 3 is equal to 64. Now, we need to figure out the value of r, since a sub 3 is equal to a sub 1 times r squared. We can fill up the rest of them here. 64 in place of a sub 3, 121 in place of a sub 1. So when you divide by 121, we get to realize that r squared must be equal to 64 over 121. Then when you take the square root on both sides, r would have been equal to 8 over 121. 8 over 11. Technically, r could have been positive or negative, but in this case, we're going to be rejecting the negative because the bounce would have never been negative in this setup. So a sub 5 must be equal to a sub 1 times r to the 4th power. So by plugging in the corresponding values, we're going to get about 33.8. So therefore, our answer should be 34. Alrighty. Let's move on to the next problem, number 5. So in this case, when you look at the expression, choices, this one should remind you of quadratic formula. So by subtracting 9 from each side, we can get 5x squared minus 2x plus 4 equal to 0. Now, by applying the quadratic formula, we get to see this expression. Now b squared, or negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac. Now, once you simplify them, negative 76 within the radical, So we can set it up this way. We need to simplify square root of 76. Since square root of 76 can be separated into square root of 4 and square root of 19, because 4 times 19 is equal to 74. Then we can rewrite this one as this way, canceling 2 out. Then we'll end up getting 1 plus or minus I square root of 19 all over 5. So we get choice 2 becomes the answer. All right. Now number 6, even though t is given in years, you can see, but we're looking for the monthly growth rate. Then the way which we have to do is 1.04, this one has to be raised by 1 over 12 because there are 12 months per year. But whole thing has to be raised by 12t. So as you can see, notice that this t, if you're to multiply these two exponents, then it would have been the same thing as the original expression. But since we are looking for the monthly rate, all we have to do is we just have to calculate 1.04 to the 1 over 12th power. If you have done that, then that's approximately equal to 1.00327. So therefore choice 3 becomes our answer. Now, number 7. When you look at this question, we're looking for next high time. The key word here is next high and also the time. Then what we are looking for here, we are actually looking for the period. If you know the period, the cycle, then we'll be able to predict the next high tide. And then since we're looking for the period, the only thing that would satisfy this one would have been choice 1, time between consecutive low tides. All right. Now in this case, I sketch this function here, over here, and we are looking for bloodstream that's strictly increasing. Then you can see that it's coming from the first 2 hours, which is choice 1. All right. Which representation has an imaginary root? Imaginary root is essentially when you take the square root of negative numbers. Now, then for the first choice, when y is equal to 0, we do actually have x values. They're negative, but not the square root of negative number, meaning it's not imaginary. So first one has a real root. Second one, or third choice, has a real root of 3 because that's the intersection with the x-axis. Choice 2, you can actually solve for x plus 3 by dividing by 2 and take the square root. Then we get plus or minus a radical 32, which is perfectly fine. It's a real root. But on the other hand, third one, last choice, x squared would have been equal to negative 16. You see, we have to then, in this case, take the square root of negative number, which will result in imaginary root. So choice 4 would have been the answer. Now, number 10. When you try to get the sample, or not biased, not to be biased, then what we need to do is we need to, we shouldn't have any special relationship between the topic and then the sample that which we are getting. So when you look at high school football field, so it has nothing to do with football, and nor high school or school for that matter. So therefore, correct answer to be most unbiased, then we have to get supermarket, people from supermarket would have been the correct answer. Alright, number 11. We just have to expand this one and then combine them. Then 2x minus I squared becomes 4x squared minus 4xi and then plus I squared. Now, keeping the negative sign over here, let's expand the second product here. Then we get 4x squared, and inner and outer we get 4xi, because inner is what? 2xi, and then, or rather negative 2xi, outer becomes 6xi. When you combine them together, we get 4xi. Alright, and then negative I times 3i becomes negative I squared. And then we can simplify that. 4x squares cancel out. And then you can combine negative 4xi and here 4xi, but because of the negative sign, we get to have negative 8xi. And I squared is negative 1. The other one is negative 3. So when you combine them together, negative 4 plus negative 8xi, which is choice 1. Alright, let's move on to the next problem. Now we have event A and B are independent. And then probability of A and B is equal to 0.2. Then what we're looking for is when you multiply event, probability of A times probability of B should be equal to 0.2. So I'm looking for something that gives me that. And only thing that's possible is choice 2. Probability of A times probability of B. So 0.8 times 0.25 would have been equal to 0.2, so therefore choice 2 would have been the answer. Now here in this case we have to figure out the value of A, B, and C from this graph. So first, when you look at this one, we get to realize that midline will be equal to C. So C value, is 3. So C value would have been equal to 3. Now, from the midline, I'm going up by 2 units or down by 2 units. So that tells me that A is equal to 2. Now, next, between two consecutive high points of the graph, we get to realize that's the pi over 3. Then that's the period. So we can say period must be pi over 3. But we know that period can be found by 2 pi over b. So when you multiply them across, we get to realize that pi b and then 6 pi is equal to 6, hence b is equal to 6. This means choice A, 1 is the answer. Alright, number 14. So focus is negative 3, 3, and then directrix is 7. So if I have to sketch that a little bit, negative 3, 3, that's my focus, and then this is my directrix, where y is equal to 7. Then we know that vertex has to be between focus and then directrix. So it's around here. That would have been our vertex. As you can see, x value wouldn't change. X value is still negative 3. We just need to find the y value. Since it's in the middle, we can just get the average of those two. So we get 7 plus 3 over 2, which becomes 5. So we realize that vertex is negative 3, 5. Now, which out of these 4 equations has negative 3 and 5 as the our vertex? Because everything is written in vertex form. It'd be choice 3. Alright, let's move on to the next problem, number 15. Now, of course, you can put this one into a calculator and then figure out what the intersections are. But in my case, we'll try to do this one by hand, algebraically. Now we have to multiply left and right side by the common denominator. Then from our left side, 3x plus 1 cancels, so we get 2x left. On my right side, x's cancel out, so we have 3x plus 1 from the first term. Now from the second one, 3x plus 1 cancels, so we have minus 6x squared left. So if I have to bring all the terms to the left, then we get 6x squared minus x minus 1. Now we have to factor this one. So then we get 6 times negative 1, we get negative 6. So I'm thinking which two numbers multiply to negative 6 but add up to 1 because of coefficient here. Oh, it's negative 3 and 2. So we can rewrite this one as this way. Now, when I factor the first two terms with 3x, I get 3x times 2x minus 1. Second one is as it is, 2x minus 1. Factoring common factor 2x minus 1, then we get 3x plus 1 left and 2x minus 1 left. Now then x must be equal to negative 1/3 and 1/2. But we have to realize that negative 1/3 makes 3x plus 1 equal to 0. But those are my denominators. So therefore, negative 1/3 has to be rejected. Then only possible answer is 1/2, which is choice 3. Alright, let's look at number 16. So here we have, doctor says she can wear them 2 hours on the first day, and then increase the length of the time by 30 minutes each day. Now, which formula would not be appropriate to determine the length of the time, either in minutes or hours? Now, so when you look at the first one, this one, actually choice 3, this one describes exactly what they said in hours, because first term is 2 hours, and then as you can see by the recursive formula, here we have whatever the previous day would have been, we are adding half an hour because 30 minutes is in half an hour. Now, choice 1 is the same thing, but except that this is in terms of minutes. So instead of 2 hours, we have 120 minutes. Instead of 0.5 hour, we have 30 minutes adding to the previous term. Now, so that's in terms of minutes, so that's good. But if you have to remember, we can write down explicit formula, which would be choice 2 and choice 4. But let's look at the hours. Then what we have to do is, this would have been our explicit formula for the length of the time in hours. So a sub 1, as you can see over here, plus m minus 1 times d, which is right over here. So when you distribute 0.5 to both terms, we have 2 and then 0.5, and that's what we end up getting. When you combine them together, we get 1.5 plus 0.5n, which doesn't fit with choice 4. So therefore 4 will be our answer. Alright, let's move on. Number 17. In order for you to get the inverse, I'm just going to first write this one as y equals a to the x power, but when you switch x and y, we get x equals a to the y power. Now, since y is in the exponent, in order for you to solve for y, we need to use logarithm. So here we have y equals log. What's the base? Obviously, base of the original expression was a, so a goes here on the bottom, and then of x. So which is choice 3 becomes our answer for this one. Alright, let's look at number 18 here. And it says she put half of her money, which is $10,000, into the annual rate of 0.9% compounded monthly. And then the other one continuously. So then we get to realize that the way which you can write it is 1 plus 0.09, because 0.09 actually should 0.009. That's the 0.9% divided by 12 and raised by 12t. And second one is 10,000 and then e to the 0.008 t. But when you put this one into the calculator, we get this expression. So therefore choice 4 would have been the answer. Alright. Now in this case, how do you know if x squared plus 2x plus 1 is a factor from the graph? So if I were to rewrite x squared plus 2x plus 1, we get to realize that that is in fact equal to x plus 1 to the second power. Now, then we get to realize that we have a double root at x equals -1. When you have a double root, then graphically it's a tangent to the x-axis at that point, which would be choice 1. Therefore, that would be our answer. Number 20. Now it says half-life is 1.8 hours. Now, then we have a table of value that shows the relationship here. The fact that we're looking for after 18 hours, what does that mean? That means it's a 10 half lives. Then you can consider a of 10, because each time it becomes halved, and you can see that from example here. It's equal to a of 1, which is the 139. Now half-life, which is 1/2, raised by 9th power. Then you get to realize that it's approximately 0.27, so choice 3 would have been the answer. Now, which expressions are equivalent? So since 2x is dividing x squared and minus 4x, if I were to separate them, it would be something like this. Now, when you simplify that, we get x can be cancelled from the first term, and entire 2x can be cancelled from the second one, so we get x over 2 minus 2, which is the same thing as the first one. But if you're to look at the second option here, when 2 divides x and -4, that is the same thing as x over 2, and then minus 4 over 2 becomes -2. So second one is also okay as well. Third one is, if I have to combine those two terms, then I get to realize that that's the same thing as choice 2. So therefore, our answer is choice 4, 1, 2, and 3 will combine it together. Alright, they are looking for the maximum value of P and minimum value of F. Notice the maximum and minimum of the parabola happens at the vertices. So now, for maximum value of the P, you can actually see that over here. And you know the y value of that becomes 5. So maximum value for P is 5. Minimum value of F, once again I have to find the vertex, turning point, right? Then x equals -b over 2a. And we get to realize a -6 over 8, which is -3 over 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in -3 over 4 into the function. Then you get to realize that using your calculator, you should be getting -5.25. Then we are looking for the difference. So what are we going to do? We're going to subtract them. 5 minus -5.25. So we get to realize that difference becomes 10.25, which is choice 4. Now let's look at number 23. So here we have mean is 68 and standard deviation is 7.2. Now we're looking for students scoring higher than 1 standard deviation above the mean will not be enrolled in the tutoring program. So how many of these 750 incoming students to be enrolled in the tutoring program? So that means we're looking for any students who gets 1 standard deviation less, anybody who gets 1 standard deviation above the mean or less. So that means if you get the same score as the mean, then that covers 50% of the students, and 1 standard deviation above the mean will be 34.1%. So combine them together, we get 84.1% of the students will be enrolled in the tutoring program. Out of 750, then we get about 631 students. So therefore choice 1 would have been the answer. Alright, question number 21, how many solutions? So then what we have to do is we have to sketch them, put this one into y sub 1, and put this one into y sub 2, and then see how many times they will be intersecting. So that's what I have done using the calculator. So then on the bottom you can see that we have 1 intersection, 2 intersection, 3, and then 4. So therefore 4 would have been the answer. Now justify why these two are equal to each other. So we have something to the 1/3 power. Cube root is equal to 1/3 power. So if I have to rewrite it, I get something like this, and then 4th root is 1/4 power. So I can do that first here. And I can distribute 1/3 to both exponents and 1/4 to the both exponents as well. And then between two x's, when we divide, we have to subtract the exponent. So x to the 2/3 power minus 3/4, and then in terms of y, 5/3 minus 1. Then we get to realize that x to the negative 1/2 and then y to the 2/3. That's why those two are equivalent. Alright, let's look at the next problem. Number 26. We have quartic, that means 4th degree, and we have 4 roots. So everything will be single root. So passing through the graph. There are many ways for us to sketch this one, but first I'm going to identify those 4 points, 2 and 4, and -2 and -4. So all I have to do is they have to pass through them once each. So this can be one such example. It could have been many other different ways as well, such as it could have been this way as well. So one or the other. All right, let's look at the next one. Number 27. We have to show that if these two are equivalent, and the answer is no, of course. But let's try to expand our first case. We know that a plus b squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Now, a plus b quantities to the 3rd power would have been essentially equal to a plus b times a plus b squared. So essentially what I'm doing is, to our previous calculation, I'm just multiplying by a plus b. Then you get to realize that a cubed plus 3a squared b plus 3ab squared and plus b to the 3rd power. And you can see that they're not equal to a cubed plus b cubed. So that's the reason why they're not equal to each other. Now, let's look at number 28. So here the probability that a resident of a housing community opposed to spending money for community improvement on plumbing issues, 0.8. Now I can write that up as probability of not PL for plumbing, let us say, that's equal to 0.8. But the second one is that probability who favors spending money on walkways, given that they are opposing to the plumbing issue. So it would be probability of walkway W given not PL is equal to 0.85. Now, but we have to realize that we are looking for probability of walkway and not PL. So then using the formula we get to realize probability of walkway and PL over probability of not plumbing, not favoring not plumbing. That is the same thing as this conditional probability. Then if I have to plug in the values, 0.85 should be equal to x over 0.8. Then we get to realize that x must be equal to 0.68 by multiplying these two. So 0.68 should be our answer. Now number 29. Rohan is training to run a race. So he runs 50 miles in the first week and then 3% more than the week before. And then they say it's geometric series formula. Find the total number of miles Rohan runs over the first 10 weeks. So we're looking for the sum here. How do you find the sum? Sum is equal to a sub 1 times 1 minus r to the n power over 1 minus r. So based upon this formula, we get to realize that we can write it this way. Now 1.03, because 3% more, that means it's going to be 3% more, that means 103%. So that's why we are using 1.03 as the rate. So that's about equal to this value. So to the nearest thousandth, 171.958 miles. All right, let's look at the next one. So here we have, we're looking for average monthly rate temperature change between August to November. I put that into y sub 1, then August will be 8, and then November will be 11. So as you can see, I went to the table and looked for those two values. So basically what I'm doing is finding the slope. So first I found the change in temperature, which is 78 minus 48. Then we get to realize about 30 point some value here. And then I have to divide that by 8 minus 11, which is negative 3 in fact. So we get negative 10.1, which represents the average monthly drop in the temperature from August to the November by month. All right. Number 31, because this one is on the unit circle, I can just put that into this form, this equation. Notice that it's in second quadrant, t value has to be negative, so we have t squared plus 4 over 7 quantity square is equal to 1. Now then t squared plus 16 over 49 must be equal to 1. Then we get to realize that t squared is 33 over 49 by subtracting. When you take the square root, we get square root of 33 over 7. But since we are looking at only negative values, so negative square root of 33 over 7 would have been the answer. when you want to sketch this one, in case of the logarithm, the expression within the parentheses has to be, when you set that equal to 0, that's how you can find the vertical asymptote. So when you set x minus 3 equal to 0, then vertical asymptote becomes 3. So that's basically what we have. Now, when you look at the shifting, you get to see that log base 2 of x would have passed through 1, 0. But by the translation of 3 to the right and 1 up, we know that the graph will pass through this particular point, 4, 1. And from that point, we can sketch that way. That will be our sketch of the given function. All right, they want us to find the value of a, b, and c. So first, I'm going to write down the third equation so that a will be the first coefficient, first term, and then b and c. So I'm going to rewrite down, that's negative a plus 6b plus 2c equals 14. Now, if I were to number all three equations, because of the negative a here, I want to combine first and then second equation. Then we get to cancel out a's. So our purpose is to get rid of one variable first. Easiest one seems to be, in this case, is a, so that's why we are adding first and third. Then we get to realize it's going to be 10b plus 8c equals 37. Now we can do the same thing with the second and third equation. And this is what we end up getting. Now, then between these two equations, what are we going to get rid of? So I was thinking maybe we'll get rid of b's and then find the value of c. And the common multiple between 10b and then 8b is 40b. So I'm multiplying the first one by 4. And then this is what we end up getting. Notice that I have to multiply the entire equation by 4. And the second one by 5. Now, I'm going to subtract them because they have the same sign. Then we are getting 17c equals 68. Now, then c must be equal to 4. Since I know the value of c, I need to go to the previous equation to find the value of b. Let us say I use the 8b plus 3c equals 16. So then 8b plus 3 times 4, which is 12, is equal to 16. Then b must be equal to 1/2. Since I know the value of c and b, now I can find the value of a. Going back to any one of those three equations, I decide to go for number 1. Then a plus 4 times 1/2 plus 6 times 4 has to be equal to 23. Then you get to realize that a must be equal to -3. So there it goes. All right, let's move on to the next problem, number 34. What they want us to do is they want us to divide, and then they want us to rewrite this division into this format. So I'm going to use the synthetic division here first. -2, because that's the value that makes x plus 2 equal to 0. And then writing down the coefficients of the x's, terms with x. So 1, 2, 0, because we don't have x squared term. And then 4 and -10. So let's get going. First number is 1. And continues this way, we get -18. So therefore, our answer will be x to the third power plus 4. And then minus 18 over x plus 2. And this is not a factor. Why? Because we have remainder of -18. In order for it to be a factor, remainder should have been equal to 0. let's move on to the next problem. So in this case, we have radio station claims that advertisements that the mean number of minutes commuters listen to, advertisers, the mean numbers of minutes that commuters listen to is about 30. And then they set up this survey, and then they ran this simulation here. All right. Now, first, we're looking for the middle 95% of the confidence interval. So that means we are looking at 2 standard deviations above the mean or 2 standard deviations below the mean. So that middle 95% goes as high as 30.969, and then it goes as low as 27.23. So these mean and then standard deviation coming from here, obviously. So our interval should be from 27.23 to 30.97, but as you can see, 30 minutes fits into this interval, so that's, yes, it's a plausible, 30 minutes is a plausible number of minutes where the commuter would have been listened to, because it is in the middle 95% of the data. Now, number 36, we need to figure out the value of x. So first, I'm going to isolate the radical first by adding 2x, and then when you square both sides, you get 9x, and then 4x squared minus 20x plus 5 and plus 25. And then by subtracting 9x, we get to have this expression. Then you're thinking, hey, how can I factor this one? That's right, 4 times 25 is 100, and then which 2 numbers multiply to 100 but add up to negative 29? It would be negative 25 and negative 4. So by rewriting it in this way, and then now we're going to factor first 2 terms with 4x, then x minus 1, and second 2 terms with negative 25. And then when you factor out x minus 1, we get 4x minus 25, and then x minus 1. Then x value should be equal to 25 over 4 or 1. Let's check. If I were to use 25 over 4 in place of x's, what do I end up getting? We get 5 over 2 and 25 over 2. So in fact, when you combine them, negative 10 over 2, which is equal to 5, so that works out. What if x value equals 1? That's what we end up getting. And then 1 is not equal to 5, so we have to reject 1. Only 25 over 4 would have been the answer. All right, number 37. So here we have, he has 318,000 in his account, and then 7% compounded annually. Now, so first he wants us to write up the function here. So a sub t is equal to 318,000, and then 1.07 because it's increasing by 7%, so that's the function. And I'm setting it up on the x-axis is a time, and we are assuming that each box is a 1 year, so it goes up to 20 years. And vertically, we're going to assume that each box is 100,000. That's about 300, 600, and so forth and so on. And what I have done was I plot this one into the y sub 1 on the calculator and used a table to come up with these values. So when you sketch them, it will be something along the line. Now, Tony's goal is to save $1 million. So algebraically, what are we going to do? So we can say, hey, this expression, the function, should be equal to 1 million. Then what we're going to be doing is we're going to first divide by 318,000. Then it's about 3.144. So how do you find t? We're going to use the logarithm. Log base of 107, 1.07, and then 3.14. Then that's about equal to 16.9 years. And then they want to convert it to the nearest year, so it's about 17 years. Graphically, what I can do is I can draw the horizontal line, basically y equals 1 million. Find the intersection, and you can see that the intersection is about 17 as well. All right, that's it. I'll see you later. Bye.